Ada was a hard-working young woman, but life was never easy for her. She lived in a small village with her mother and younger siblings. Her father had passed away when she was just a child, leaving her mother to take care of everything. Ada did all she could to support her family. She worked hard every day, waking up early and going to bed late. Sometimes she would carry heavy load of firewood or walk miles to sell things in the market. Despite her tireless efforts, the family was still poor. They often went to bed hungry, with little to no food to eat. Every time Ada looked at her sick mother and crying siblings, her heart broke. One morning, Ada woke up feeling weak and tired. The entire night, she couldn't sleep because she kept thinking about her mother, who had grown worse from illness. They had no money left to buy medicine, and her mother's cough had gotten worse. Her younger siblings sat quietly, looking at her with sad eyes, knowing they had not eaten for 2 days. Ada's stomach growled loudly, but she couldn't feed herself when her family was starving. It seems like nothing was going right, and no matter how hard she tried, things never improved. Ada had tried everything, but nothing seems to work. She had taken up every job she could find, but the pay was never enough. She would go to the market to sell fruits, but people didn't have enough money to buy. She would clean houses for others, but the money she earned was just enough to buy a few vegetables for dinner. Despite her best efforts, there was always more months left than money. One evening, after finishing yet another long day of work, Ada sat in their small house, tears flowing down her face. She looked at her mother, whose body was now too weak to even sit up. Why, God? She whispered to herself. Why is it always me? Why must I suffer like this? As Ada sat there, feeling hopeless, her younger brother tugged at her shirt. Ada, when will we eat again? He asked softly. His voice was full of worry and sadness. Ada didn't know what to say. She wanted to tell him everything would be okay, but deep down, she didn't believe it. She hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her face. She had no answer. She was trying her best, but it never seemed enough. She prayed every night, hoping for a miracle, but it felt as if her prayer were going unanswered. The weight of responsibility on her shoulder was too much to bear. Days passed, and Ada continued to work tirelessly. She walked through the village, hoping to find some way to earn a little money. It seems like everyone else had a way out, but she was stuck in this cycle of poverty. She wondered if there was more to life than this, if there was a way for her family to escape. But where could she go? She had no one to turn to, no place to run to. Just when she thought things couldn't get any worse, she ran into someone she hadn't seen in years. Chinonso, her childhood friend. Chisom had left the village many years ago to live in the city, and now she was back. Ada looked at her in shock as she saw the shining car parked nearby. Chisom stepped out, wearing expensive clothes and expensive jewelry. Her face was glowing with success. Ada couldn't believe it. Chisom, is that really you? She asked, her voice trembling. Chisom smiled and hugged her, telling her how much she had missed her. But Ada couldn't help but feel a little bit of jealous. Here was Chisom, looking beautiful and rich, while she was struggling to survive. How did you do it, Chisom? Ada asked, her voice full of curiosity and longing. How did you become so successful? Chisom looked at her with a pitiful expression. then began to tell her how life in the city was full of opportunities. She told Ada that there was plenty of money to be made, but the real secret was knowing the right people. Ada felt a mixture of happiness and envy. She had always dreamed of escaping the village, but now she felt a deep desperation. Her family was suffering, and she didn't know how much longer they would survive like this. Tears streamed down Ada's face as she told Chisom about her condition and how her mother has been sick and her siblings haven't eaten for almost 2 days now. Chisom gave Ada some money to help with her mother's medicine and to buy food for her younger siblings, and told her that she should come to the city with her. "You don't have to live like this, Ada," Chisom said. "Come to the city with me. There is a place for you there. I can show you how to make money." Ada looked down at the money in her hand. She felt a mist of emotion. She wanted to say yes, but at the same time, she felt unsure. Her mother had always warned her about the dangers of the city, but how could she say no to an opportunity like this? Later that evening, Ada sat down with her mother to talk about Chisom's offer. Her mother listened carefully, but her face was filled with concern. "Ada, you don't know what Chisom is really doing in the city," her mother warned. "I have a bad feeling about this. You don't trust people easily." But Ada was tired of the constant struggle. She didn't want to see her family suffer anymore. "Mother, I can't stand to see you sick. I can't bear to see my siblings hungry," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "I want to help. I want to make a life for us. If this is the only way, then I have to take it." Her mother sighed and nodded, but deep down, she was worried. "Think carefully, Ada. Pray for guidance," she said softly. But Ada was already certain. She had made up her mind. She would leave for the city. She would do whatever it takes to escape poverty. The next day, she packed her bag and said goodbye to her family, promising that she would come back once she had made enough money. As she hugged her siblings, her heart felt heavy, but she was determined. She climbed into Chinonso's luxurious car and left the village, hoping that this was the beginning of a better life. Ada was amazed when she arrived in the city with Chinonso. The city was nothing like her village. Tall buildings stretched up to the sky, and the streets were filled with busy people driving expensive cars. Everything seemed so bright and full of life. Chinonso's mansion was beautiful. Ada couldn't believe her eyes when she saw the huge beautiful house with its tall gates and perfectly trimmed garden. The rooms inside were filled with expensive furniture, and there were shiny chandeliers hanging from the ceiling. It was like a dream Ada had longed for all her life. At first, life in the city felt like paradise. Chin also told Ada to relax, enjoy the luxury. She had everything a person could dream of: endless food, beautiful clothes, and a big TV to watch all day. Chin also took Ada to shopping malls where they bought designers' clothes and expensive shoes. But as the day passed, Ada began to wonder why Chinonso hadn't shown her how to make money. She spent most of her time eating, watching TV, and shopping, but nothing seems to be happening. She began to feel like she was just sitting around while her family's problem back home continued to grow. Ada wanted to know how Chinonso became so rich. She was desperate to find a way to make money, but every time she asked Chinonso, her friend told her to be patient and enjoy the life they were living. "You are not ready," Chinonso would say, "but when you are, I will show you everything." The luxury around her felt nice, but Ada couldn't help but feel jealous. She saw how easily Chinonso and her friends spent money, and it made her want to join them. She began to long for the same lifestyle, and her desire to escape poverty became stronger with each passing day. One evening, after another day of shopping, Ada couldn't hold her frustration anymore. She confronted Chinonso in the living room, her voice shaking with anger. "Why did you bring me to the city if you are not going to help me?" She shouted. "I left my family behind, my sick mother, my starving siblings, and you promised me a better life. But all I'm doing here is sitting around, doing nothing. Why won't you show me how to make money? Why are you not helping me, Chinonso?" Chinonso stared at her for a moment, her face calm, before she finally spoke. "So you are really ready to do whatever it takes?" she asked, her voice almost teasing. Ada's heart skip a beat. What did Chinonso mean by that? But she was too desperate to care. "I am ready," she said, her voice shaking with both fear and excitement. "I will do anything to help my family. I will do whatever it takes to escape this life." Chinonso smiled with a knowing look in her eyes. "Good," she said softly. "Get ready tomorrow. We are going somewhere. I will show you the way." That night, Ada couldn't sleep. Her mind raced with the thought of what might happen the next day. What was Chinonso going to show her? Was she really ready for what was coming? She didn't know, but she couldn't turn back now. She had already made up her mind. She was going to do whatever it took to make money, no matter the cost. The next morning, Chisom took Ada out of the mansion and into her car. They drove for what felt like hours, leaving the city behind and heading to a quieter, more mysterious part of the town. As they got closer to their destination, Ada's heart began to race. The house they arrived at was dark and eerie. Unlike the bright, lively mansion they had left, it looked like a place that didn't belong in the city. The windows were dark and the gates were tall and intimidating. The air around it felt heavy, and Ada's stomach twisted with unease. Inside the house, everything was dark and cold. They were led into a waiting room, where they sat for hours. Ada grew anxious and kept looking at Chisom for reassurance, but her friend seemed calm, almost as if she had been here before. After what felt like forever, they were finally called in to meet the woman who lived there. She was known as Madam Queen, but Chisom called her Queen Mother, which made Ada feel even more unease. The woman sat on a golden throne, dressed in a long red gown that shimmered in the dim light. She looked powerful, and her eyes seemed to see right through Ada. Madam Queen looked at Ada carefully, and then turned to Chinonso. "Is she ready?" she asked, her voice deep and commanding. Chinonso nodded, but there was a hint of fear in her eyes. "She is ready, Madam Queen," she said, but her voice sounded unsure. Madam Queen raised an eyebrow as if she didn't quite believe it. "Are you sure?" she asked Ada. Ada's heart pounded in her chest, but she nodded, though she felt nervous. "Yes," she said, "I am ready." Madam Queen stared at her for a long time, and then a maid came in and handed them blindfolds. Ada felt a wave of fear wash over her. What was happening? Why did they need blindfolds? Chinonso reassured her, but her voice sounded different, almost cold. "It is part of the process," she said. Ada was scared, but she tried to push her fear aside. She didn't know what was about to happen, but she had already decided she would do whatever it takes to make money. They were led into a dark room where the air smelled of incense and something strange. like burning herbs. The flickering light from candles created shadows on the wall, making everything feel even more mysterious. In the center of the room stood a wooden altar, draped in a red cloth. The shelves around the room were filled with jars, bones, and objects that Adama didn't understand. A dusty mirror stood in the corner, reflecting the eerie stillness of the room. It was clear to Adama now that this was no ordinary place. This was a court, a secret world that she had never imagined, and was very disappointed in Chinonso. When the Queen Mother entered the room, she was dressed in a flowing red robe and a golden crown. She looked powerful like a queen. Ada could feel the weight of her presence in the room. Ada's heart raced as she tapped Chinonso urgently, her voice trembling with fear. "I don't think I can do this," she whispered, her eyes wide with terror. Chinonso, however, remained calm, trying to smooth her. "Ada, listen to me. It is worth it. You will see how easy and fast money will come." At first, Ada recoiled, horrified. "I can't. I just can't." Chinonso leaned closer to her ear, her voice gentle but firm. "Think about your mother's health, Ada. She is getting worse every day. And your siblings, they are about to be thrown out of school. You can't let that happen, can you?" Ada's tears welled up as she began to cry. "But what if Madame Q asks me to sacrifice my family?" Chinonso's hand shot out to cover Ada's mouth, silencing her. "In the chamber, we call her Queen Mother. Do not speak that name again, or you will face the consequences. And no, you will not sacrifice your family. I promise you that." Ada stared at her, confusion and fear mixing in her eyes. "But how can I do the ritual without sacrificing anything?" Chisom's lips coiled into a faint smile. "I said you won't sacrifice your family, not that you won't sacrifice at all." Ada was shocked, her face drained of color. "I am not sacrificing anyone, no, Chinonso. I am not sacrificing any human being, whether relative or not. I am not sacrificing no one." Chinonso laughed softly, her tone almost teasing. "You won't sacrifice a human, Ada." Ada breathed a sigh of relief, though her fear still lingered, unsure of what this new path would truly demand. Ada was led into the inner sanctum of the court, her heart pounding as the ritual began. The room was dark, lit only by the flickering candles arranged in a circle around her. The air was thick with the smell of burning herbs, and eerie chants filled the room. Madame Q, the court leader, stood in the center, her cold eyes fixed on Ada as she recited incantation in a language Ada couldn't understand. The initiation was gruesome, and Ada felt as though her soul was being ripped apart. When it was over, she collapsed to the floor, trembling and drenched in sweat. After the ritual, Madame Q delivered the news that shattered Ada's heart. "Your sacrifice has been made," she said coldly. "You are now bound to the court. From this moment, you can use your wealth to help everyone and anyone you choose, except your family." Ada stared at her, unable to understand what she had just heard. Madame Q's word echoed in her ears. The more her family suffers, the more wealth she will have. Ada shook her head in disbelief. "No, no, 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 no," she muttered, tears streaming down her face. "I joined this court to help my family. What is the point of all this money if I can't help them? Queen Mother, please, this can't be true." Madame Q remained silent, her expression cold and unyielding. Finally, she spoke. If you break the rules and try to help your family, both you and your family will die. And if someone else dares to help them, you will run mad. The consequences are severe. Royalty is demanded, and disobedience will bring unimaginable suffering, not just for you, but for your entire family. Ada fell to her knees, crying uncontrollably. Please, Queen Mother, she begged, change the sacrifice. I don't want the money if it means my family has to suffer. Please. Queen Mother gaze hardened. The ritual is complete. There is no going back. If you attempt to undo it, your mother will die instantly. The choice is yours. Ada turned to Chinoso, her face twisted in anger and despair. Why did you bring me here? She shouted. You knew how much I love my family. Why didn't you warn me about this? Chinoso looked just as shocked as Ada. She stammered, I didn't know, Ada. Please believe me, my sacrifice was never to get married. I thought yours would be something similar. I had no idea it would involve your family. I swear, I would never have brought you here if I knew, but our words offer no comfort. Ada felt betrayed and trapped. As they left the mansion, Ada was silent, her mind spinning with fear and regret. Throughout the ride back to Chinonso's house, she sat quietly, tears rolling down her cheeks. Her thoughts were consumed by her family's suffering and the impossible situation she now found herself in. Chinonso tried to console her. Ada, she said softly, at least you are rich now. Forget about your family and start a new life. They have never appreciated you and they don't deserve your help. Ada glared at her through her tears. You don't understand, she said bitterly. I didn't want money for myself. I wanted it for them. How can I forget about my family? How can I let them suffer while I live in luxury? Months passed, and Ada's life changed dramatically. Contracts and business deals came her way effortlessly. Wealth poured in from sources she couldn't explain. Strangers blessed her, offering her opportunity and connection she had never dreamed of. In no time, she became one of the richest women in the city. But her newfound wealth brought her no joy. Ada spent sleepless nights thinking about her family in the village. She imagined her mother struggling to put food on the table, her siblings going hungry, and their house falling apart. She would sit alone in her grand mansion, tears streaming down her face as she prayed. God, please forgive me, she whispered. Help my family. I didn't know what I was doing. Please save me. Please help me. Sometimes she resents Chinonso, blaming her for leading her into the court. But deep down, Ada knew she had made the choice out of desperation. She had wanted to help her family, but now her wealth had become a curse. Years went by, and Ada established herself as a businesswoman. People admire her for her intelligence and generosity. She donated money to charities and helped strangers, even people from her village, but she avoided her family at all costs. She couldn't bear the thought of rejecting them if they ever reached out to her. Despite her efforts to stay away, Ada couldn't stop thinking about her family. Sometimes she would secretly visit the village, hiding in the shadows as she watched them from afar. She saw her mother's frail body struggling to carry firewood, her siblings begging for food, and their once proud home crumbling to ruin. Each visit tore her heart apart. Ada lived with constant guilt and sorrow. She had everything she had ever dreamed of, yet she felt emptier than ever. Every night she prayed for a miracle. God, please, she begged, show me a way out of this. Help my family. I would give up everything to see them happy again. But her prayers seems to fall on deaf ears. The price of her wealth was too high, and she was wrapped in a nightmare of her own making.